Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you were able to make it. Today, we are going to focus on two topics. First, we're going to talk about automated transcription in Transana. This is a project I've been working on for a little over a year, and we finally achieved the goal of automated transcription through software. It's finally good enough that I was willing to release it. It's something I've been working with for many years, but only now is it actually good enough to see the light of day. And then I'm going to talk a little bit after that about things that one can do beyond verbatim transcription, the analytic uses of transcription and ways of transcribing beyond just looking at words or the verbal level of your data. And I recognize that a lot of people are here specifically for the first half of the presentation to see about automated transcription, and if you choose to leave after that, that's fine. I recognize that that's a choice that some of you are going to make. So let's dive right in. I've got a lot to talk about today, so we'll just move forward a little on the fast side likely, but if you have questions, please do feel comfortable interrupting me to ask your questions. I think that it's best to ask your questions as they come up and not hold them. So there are a number of issues to consider when you're thinking about automated transcription, when you're choosing how to proceed with automated transcription. It's unfortunately, everybody hopes that it's going to be simple, push a button and it spits out a beautiful and perfect transcript, and that is just not the state of the art. That's not how things work. You need to make a number of decisions in thinking about automated transcription. First is the issue of confidentiality, which is partially protection of your data, partially protection of the sensitive data from your subjects. And on a more practical level, you need to get the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, the ethics board of your university to approve your procedures and make sure that all issues of confidentiality are properly addressed. And there are a number of different models for that in the world of automated transcription. So it's something that you need to think about and plan for carefully in choosing your automated transcription process. You need to think about the language spoken in your data and make sure that the tool that you are using supports that language. There's a really broad range in the number of languages and in the specifics of languages that are supported by automated transcription tools. I have to admit, for Transana, I've tested them in English. I have not tested them in other languages because, unfortunately, I'm a monolingual American and can't really do that testing. My translators, the people who write the translations of Transana into other languages, have looked at it, and they've generally had good things to say about it, but I don't know how rigorous their testing has been. Audio quality, the quality of your data, the quality of the audio that you record for your research makes a really big difference in which automated transcription tool you might choose. Some tools are better than others at data that is less than broadcast quality. There's also the issue of transcription quality. How accurate do you need coming out at the end of the process? What you'll see here is I've run a whole series of tests. I've looked at 4 different types of data. The blue line is a television advertisement. And you can see that, and I ran it across 12 different methods of automated transcription. And you see that with the television ad, accuracy ranged from about 92% to about 95%. Pretty good accuracy, nothing was perfect. But that's really clear audio with no distractions. The dark red line is a BBC News piece that I ran through all of the processes. 2 speakers, they had British accents, which shouldn't make a difference. But you can see that the accuracy of that was slightly less ranging from about 89% to about 93% accuracy. The green line is a hour and a half long movie. I chose Henry Fonda's classic 12 Angry Men. And you can see that there's a lot of variation in the quality of the transcription that I got from that. A low of 65% and a peak of almost 90%. And that was mostly because of things like background music. Background music was very, very confusing to some of the models, and others were able to interpret it more correctly. And then the purple line here at the bottom was classroom data recorded in an American classroom. And you can see that the performance of all of the models was significantly less excellent for this real life data. My guess is that most of the data that you collect will be closer to this bottom line. And you can see that it went from a really unacceptable 58% up to a maximum of about 80%. So 4 out of 5 words were correct. And sometimes it was just minor variations in terms of word form or singular versus plural, but other times it was much larger issues. But you can see that even in the best case scenario, 1 word in 20 is still going to need a little bit of user attention. But you can also see that the different models that are available yielded very different results in transcription quality, and that the type of data that they were given had a pretty big influence on the quality of the transcription as well. There's an issue of cost. Some of the automated transcription services are available for free. Others are really cheap. Others are more expensive. I've been really a little surprised at the range of cost in the automated transcription services that I've looked at as I was preparing to develop that feature for Transana. And processing speed is another thing to take into account. There were really, really huge ranges in the amount of time that it took to create transcripts based on these data samples across the 12 different methods that were supported. So confidentiality, language, the quality of both the data and of the transcript, the cost, and the processing speed are all issues to take into consideration when you're thinking about automated transcription for your research project. To make that more specific to Transana, Transana offers 3 different automated transcription methods built into the software. The first is called Faster Whisper, the second is called Speechmatics, and the third is called DeepGram. So these are different companies or different organizations that have created automated transcription methodologies, and Transana supports 3 different methods that address different needs of researchers. But to make that slightly more complicated, Faster Whisper, in fact, offers 7 different models within its overall approach, and you need to choose between those models. Speechmatics offers 2 different models, and DeepGram offers 3 different models. So we're talking about 12 different options across the 3 services that Transana supports. In terms of the deciding factors in what automated transcription package to choose, let's look at some of those issues. Faster Whisper is an embedded tool. What that means is that Faster Whispers is built into Transana completely. It runs on your computer. It processes the data on your computer. Your data never leaves your computer when transcribed by using the Faster Whisper tool. Speechmatics and DeepGram, on the other hand, are both server-based tools. That means that you take your data, you send it out to their server for processing, and they send back the resulting transcript. And they take steps to protect the confidentiality of your data, of course, and they have all sorts of rules and policies. But I have found that for some types of data and for some locations, ethics review panels are a little cautious, more cautious about server-based systems than embedded systems. So I was working on a medical study recently where we had interviews of people talking about their use of opioids. And that's not data that any IRB is going to allow you to send out to a server that's out of your control. That data is just too sensitive to take even the minimal risks of a well-protected server. So there are some types of data that you can only run on an embedded server, and some IRBs, some ethics boards, are more cautious than others in terms of authorizing the use of commercial server-based services. So you need to, when you decide which system you want, you need to get approval from your IRB to use that if it's a server-based system, and they're going to have questions about the confidentiality, the safety, the protection of that data. Faster Whisper supports about 100 languages. It's a really impressive list of languages, including a number of languages that I'd never heard of before. But it's a long list of languages. Speechmatic supports about 48 languages. I say about because the number changes as their service evolves. And then DeepGram supports between 2 and 21 languages. As I mentioned earlier, DeepGram has 3 different models, and DeepGram has made the choice to support different languages with different models, whereas Speechmatics and Faster Whisper support all languages for all models. So DeepGram's Nova model only supports English and Spanish, whereas their base model supports 21 different languages. So all of the most common languages, French, German, Italian, English, Portuguese, are supported by all 3 tools. Some of the less common languages are supported by fewer tools, and there are some languages that only Faster Whisper supports, although there's at least one language that Speechmatic supports that Faster Whisper doesn't. The languages supported by the different models are all posted on the Transana website. In the tutorial, there's an overview of automated transcription, and that actually lists the languages supported by each of these models. For Faster Whisper, the accuracy of transcription varies really, really widely, and varies both depending on the data put in and on the model selected. And so there is a lot of variance within Faster Whisper about the accuracy of the resulting transcript. Speechmatics, as a general rule, has very high accuracy. In those 12 tests that I ran across 4 different data types, Speechmatics had the highest score and the 5th highest score, but overall did really, really well. DeepGram has lower accuracy. DeepGram had 3 of the 5 lowest scores across the 12 models. So DeepGram is less accurate than some of the others. In terms of processing speed, Faster Whisper can be really slow compared to the other, especially the larger models that have greater accuracy can be very slow. I processed an 1.5 hour long video last night that ended up taking over 4 hours to be processed on the highest level of accuracy with Faster Whisper. That's really slow. That requires some planning and some patience to work with really large data sets in really large models that are focused more on accuracy than speed. Speechmatics, it has a much more reasonable processing speed. As a general rule, Speechmatics will take between 1/3 and 1/2, maybe 1/3 and 2/3 of the time of the media file for processing. So if you have an 1-hour-long video, it'll take between 20 and 35 or 40 minutes. DeepGram is extremely fast. We're talking a matter of 15 to 30 seconds for an 1.5 hour long movie, which I don't know how they do that. That's absolutely amazing, but the price of that speed is lower accuracy in the end product. And Speechmatics and DeepGram, because they're running on a server, they're able to throw much more powerful hardware at the issue of of automated transcription, whereas because Faster Whisper runs on your own computer, it's using what your computer brings to the process. And as a general rule, your computer is going to be slower than the computers that these companies are running their processes on. And that's why the embedded system of Faster Whisper is slower than the others. So this that really means that you have to look at a number of factors and make some decisions about which of those processes is right for you. And it is a rather, it can be really complicated if you get too deeply into it. But again, I think I've sort of laid out the issues of data confidentiality, or Faster Whispers as the embedded system is the safest, the most likely to get approved by your ethics board. Faster Whisper supports the most languages, with Speechmatics coming in second. Speechmatics wins in terms of transcription quality, and DeepGram wins in terms of speed. The Speechmatics comes in a reasonable second, and Faster Whisper varies a lot depending on which model you select. And so if you have really good quality data and can choose a smaller model, that will cut down your processing time considerably. So let me demonstrate what automated transcription looks like in Transana. So here's Transana. I've got my data set here. And so I'm going to start with, I'm going to go to a library and I'm going to add an episode. So I'm bringing a media file into Transana. I'm going to go out and I'm just going to choose my demonstration data file. This is classroom data. So I'm not expecting fantastic accuracy. Best I can hope for is about 80% accuracy on this data because of the nature of the data itself. So I've selected that video and I've added that to Transana, and I'm now going to create a transcript. So normally you would give your transcript a name related to the data. So you call it demonstration data, or what the school that it was at, or the teacher, or the lesson, or whatever's the most relevant aspect of that. For the sake of demonstrating here, I'm going to call it Faster Whisper, which is the service I'm going to use, and I'm going to call it small. I'm going to use the Faster Whisper small model. It's less accurate, but it's faster. Nobody wants to sit around for 20 minutes watching the system count down as it processes the thing. So I'm just going to choose a small model for relatively fast processing. And you'll notice down here, I've given my transcript a name, and there's this box called Automated Transcription Method. That allows me to choose Faster Whisper or DeepGram or Speechmatics, whichever one is the one I've decided is best for this particular part of my research project. So I'm going to choose Faster Whisper for that. And I'm going to click OK to signal that I want to create the transcript now. And so Transana runs the Faster Whisper tool, and it has some use notes that basically say that your data is not going to be perfect, and don't blame Transana for that. For the others, there is some warning on this page about not sending data to their server unless you have approval from your ethics board if the data is sufficiently in need of data protection and confidentiality. So make sure you've got your paperwork in place. The next screen, it extracts the audio from the video file. So when Transana is working on automated transcription, it strips the audio out of video files and just processes the audio. That's more efficient for sending to servers. You're sending smaller files, and for the system that's staying on your computer, just gives less data to the automated transcription processing software, so that it can work faster. So we strip out the audio as a step, then we specify what we're looking for. So in this case, Our data is in English. You can see I have a number of models listed here. I'm going to choose the small model, less accurate but faster. I have the option of having time codes every sentence or every word. Every sentence is good enough for what I need here. And so I'm now going to send that information in. Now, okay, I forgot to clear out, there is an existing version of this automated transcription that I worked on yesterday. If you submit your data for automated transcription, it's such a long process. Transana will remember that information and allow you to skip that processing. So I'm going to hit the resubmit. So it's now actually going out. You can see it's loading the model. It's created the model. It's now doing the transcription and processing the results. And so it's actually doing the work of the automated transcription. You can see it's telling me, at least initially, it's going to take a little bit over a minute. That estimate is going to change. So while it's doing that, does anybody have any questions about what I've talked about so far? If you have a question, remember to unmute your microphone, or you can type messages into Zoom's chat function. Everything's made sense so far? Do you have a sense of which of these systems is going to be better for your particular data, for your particular study? Okay, I've got a comment in the chat that things are clear. This is not a very exciting part of the demonstration, but ultimately it's actually pretty accurate because automated transcription generally takes a certain amount of time to process, and there's often nothing you can do about that. One of the things that I actually do to get around that is I'll often run two computers next to each other. I'll have one computer doing automated transcription while I'm working on analysis of data on the other computer. So you can actually, if you know that you're going to have an automated transcription process that's going to take some time, that's one way of handling it. Another thing is for particularly long files, I might set them up at the end of the day to do the automated transcription process, let that run overnight while I'm out of the office, and do that. So it does take a little bit of planning sometimes. Automated transcription is not necessarily an immediate process. So we see now that we've gotten up to 100. This process is done. So I'm going to click finish, and Transana is now taking that data and it presents it in Transana's screen. Within the Transana interface, we see that.
Why do you think it is that the computer with the quilting software, since that software is for us to use to design quilts, why won't it let us do something we found out about quilts, which is diagonal flips? Maybe they've never heard of them. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah. Maybe there is no. Maybe the people that put the thing and didn't know about diagonal flips, or maybe.
So you can see that, for example, overtalk tends to confuse the automated transcription processes. It tends not to handle overtalk particularly well. You can also see that Transana has given me words in different colors here. What Transana does is the automated transcription software gives an estimate of how accurate, how confident it is in each word that it places in the transcript. So if it's got 90% or higher confidence, Transana puts that word in black. If it's between 80 and 90% confidence, it's blue. So the word want here is in blue, it's probably right. Between 70 and 80% confidence is green, below 70% confidence is red. And that is great in theory, but I have found that those confidence levels are not necessarily that accurate. I have found lots of instances where words in red are absolutely correct. I've found lots of instances where words that are confidently in black are just plain wrong. Sometimes the program will leave out the word no in a sentence. We have no bananas versus we have bananas, very different meaning. And so you can't necessarily entirely trust automated transcription. And so one of the tools in Transana is, as you're going through, what I typically will do is go one sentence at a time, listen to that sentence. If it's accurate, there's a new button that just turns my text black. That's when I've checked and everything is right. I can just turn that black to get rid of the coloring that's in there. And then when I'm done, I'll delete the header, and that indicates that I've gone through the transcript, I've double checked it, I've made sure that it's accurate. Okay, I see a question in the chat. What's the cost of using these systems within Transana? Or is that embedded in the cost of Transana? That's a good question. And the answer is different for different systems. Faster Whisper, the embedded system, the one that I just used, is free to use. There's no additional charge for that. Faster Whisper is the result of an open source development project that makes its source available for free. And so I can build that into Transana and not have to not incur any cost myself that I would have to pass on to you. So using Faster Whisper is free. Both Speechmatics and Deepgram charge for their services. And so a part of the configuration process is you get an account with those companies and they and you set up billing through them. Deepgram gives you $200 worth of free service to get you started, and their rates are relatively low. So that's actually quite a bit of transcription that you can get done before you start getting charged. And their rates are pretty low compared to some others that I've seen. Speechmatics gives you a small amount. I think it's a couple of hours a month of free transcription, and you pay beyond that. Their prices are a little bit higher than Deepgram, but still relatively cheap. Some of the other services I looked at in terms of what I might integrate into Transana were considerably more expensive than those two. So if you're using one of the server-based systems, you have to create an account with them and you have a relationship with them where you pay for the services used. I don't get a cut of that. Transana doesn't receive any money from that. They didn't pay me to include their software. I didn't pay them to include their software. It's all financially neutral, but they expect payment for their services, which you can't really blame them for. And so those two do have a fee, whereas Faster Whisper does not. Okay, so we've now seen what automated transcription looks like in Transana. And so you can see, okay, so in my mind, the automated transcript is really a first draft, a rough draft of the data. I always do take the time because of the way that I work and because of the level of precision that I like in my system. I always go through and the first thing I do is listen to the data, compare it with the transcript, correct the transcript, and that's a good way of familiarizing myself with the data anyway. Vivian, do you have a question?
Yeah, right. I have one. Right now, I'm using the 5.0 version of Transana, and the version that is with the Whisper transcription, with the automated transcription embedded. That's a version 5.10, right? My question is, how can I, so am I able to upgrade Transana, and how am I able to upgrade this? Or
All right. The way that you're able to do that is to go to the Transana website. And if you go to the user support section, there's a downloads and upgrades menu option. And you should type the email address that you used to order Transana into that box. And the system will then generate an email for you that will either give you the link to the new version, and if you purchased less than a year ago, then you get that, then it's a free upgrade to that version. If you purchased more than a year ago, but less than 3 years ago, it'll send you a link to upgrade your cost at a discount. And if your purchase was more than 3 years ago, then you need to purchase Transana Fresh to get the newer features, because that's how I pay for my time to develop all of these new features.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so then I have an additional question to that, because the mail address I ordered Transana is one from my university, and so I need to put this mail address and not mine. That is the mail address that I using to authorize Transana, right?
Did you receive the download instructions to your email, or did that go to somebody else and they forwarded it to you?
I received it to my email.
Then you should be able to just enter that email address, because
Okay.
the email, when you buy Transana, you specify who the end user is and you specify who's paying for it, because that's different in a lot of universities. And Transana will track, if you're the end user that was identified in the purchase, that address will work.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, so automated transcripts should be considered first drafts. I go through and I check them. Part of the purpose of that is that's how I familiarize myself with the data before I like to go through the data once before I start analyzing it, just to see what's there, get an overall view of it, have a sense of what's coming, those kinds of things. That's my analytic process. Other people I know don't correct the transcript until they're doing the analysis. So they might let the transcript be wrong in parts that they're not interested in. And when they get to something that they want to create clips from and use in their analysis, they'll make the corrections at that point in the transcript. But unless you're using really, really good quality data, if you're using broadcast television shows or professionally produced pieces, then you probably won't have as much correction to do. But if you're using data collected in the field where your microphone might not be great, or there's overtalk, or I noticed in movies, for example, that background music confused the software in many cases. So if you don't have a lot of that interference, you may not have to do a lot of correction, but there's a lot of factors that can make the quality of the transcription be less than ideal. So just expect to put in that time. It's still less time than it would take you to create the transcript without the automated transcription tools, though. I promise you that. As I showed you, Transana provides word-by-word accuracy estimates so that you know which words it thinks are right and which ones it's not so sure about. And in terms of automated transcription, rapid change is likely. It's a field that's moving really, really fast. So I'm anticipating improved speed and accuracy. It's improved incredibly over the past year. I foresee that it will continue to improve over the next year. Translation is coming. If you use Faster Whisper on data that is not in English, Transana offers you the opportunity to create an English translation transcript, as well as creating a transcript in the language that is spoken. So translation to English is implemented in Faster Whisper in Transana. One of the other services, Speechmatics, offers translation from whatever language the data is in to a different language that you select. I've not implemented that in Transana yet, but I will do that over the next few months. So translation is starting to appear and is going to become more readily accessible as I continue to work on things. Speaker identification is something that a number of tools talk about. DeepGram particularly talks about speaker identification as something that they are in the process of implementing. They may just have released it. I have not embedded that into Transana yet. Don't know how good it's going to be either. And then topic and sentiment analysis. So a number of programs offer summaries. If you're a business and you have them listen to your business meetings, they'll give you a summary of your business meeting. That might have implications for for qualitative analysis. I haven't really checked into it. And I got an email from DeepGram 2 days ago introducing sentiment analysis, where apparently they're going to provide some estimate about the emotional state behind what is spoken. And again, I haven't had a chance to look at that, but that looks like something that might be very interesting. And I haven't figured out how useful it's going to be in qualitative analysis yet, because it's too new a feature. But there's lots going on in the field of automated transcription that promises that there will be a lot of change over the next year or two in this general field. So that covers what I wanted to say specifically about automated transcription. I was trying to make it, about automated transcription in general with just a little bit of Transana thrown in there in terms of specific implementations. Does anybody have any questions either about automated transcription in general or about how Transana integrates it? All right, let's go ahead and move on then to thinking about ways of moving beyond verbatim transcription. What are ways that the act of transcription can be useful even when you're not focusing on the words? And again, I'm going to be moving rather fast here. I have an hour and a half's worth of material to fit into the next 25 minutes, but interrupt me with questions as we go. So a transcript in my mind is any written record that corresponds with a media file. So I have people who use Transana to study animal behavior. Well, the animals aren't talking that we know of. And so what do they transcribe? They transcribe a whole host of behaviors and actions and things like that. There are people who use Transana to analyze dance, who use Transana to analyze music that may or may not have lyrics. So there are lots of ways that one can think about transcription that goes beyond the spoken word. It is really important to emphasize that your transcript is not your data. I read so many articles and they say, we did interviews and we transcribed the interviews and we threw away the interviews and analyzed the transcripts. And that is a terrible practice in my experience, because you lose detail when you move away from the media file. You lose inflection, you lose emotion, you lose, if you've got video, you lose gesture and facial expression and body posture and all kinds of nonverbal hints at what the data means. And if that's a hard concept for you, what I would suggest to you is take a stand-up comic from Netflix and transcribe their show and read it. And you will find that it's not nearly as funny as watching the video of that, because there's so much that goes into stand-up comedy that is beyond the verbal level. Jokes are great, but you can look at gesture and expression and movement and a whole host of other things that add to that. So a transcript is an abstract representation of your data. It's not a replacement for your data. You analyze the media, and the transcript is a tool that helps you do it. And one of the ways that it functions as a tool is that it's a map. It's really hard to find the video of that one bit where that one kid said that one thing, but it's much easier to search a transcript for a couple of the words that the kid said, and you can find that spot in your data much more easily using the transcript. So it's a map to your data. It's not a replacement for your data. I cannot emphasize that point strongly enough. All transcription requires making analytic decisions. We just spent a little over a half hour talking about the analytic decisions that go into automated transcription. You got to make all these decisions about, confidentiality and quality of the data and which service you're going to use. But that's even more true of transcripts that you are creating yourself. There are lots of analytic decisions. Automated transcription brings a set of assumptions to the transcription process that may or may not apply to your work. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The other thing I want to emphasize is that a transcript is a living thing that can and will change as you look at your data over and over again. I can't tell you the number of times I've watched data 10 times, and then the 11th time I've heard something different. I heard a word that I missed before that was said almost in passing or quietly or something like that. And so you can expect your transcripts to change as you work with your data. From my point of view, that is a strength compared to a transcript only get rid of the video approach to analyzing data. It's just important to acknowledge that transcripts change with time, and that's part of the analytic process. So there are lots of different kinds of transcripts that people can create. You can analyze video data or audio data without creating a transcript at all. There are times when that's analytically appropriate. If you need to go through your data once, code it quick, and move on and never go back to it, don't waste the time creating transcripts. Just listen and code and move on. If you're on a really tight budget, if you have a really, really tight timeline, marketing companies, for example, they'll do focus groups and the customer, the client wants a report, the next morning. Well, you don't have time to transcribe in that scenario. So you go through the data as fast as you can, you work directly with the video, no transcript, and you do the best you can given the constraints that you've got. Where the emphasis is on speed rather than analytic depth. Working without a transcript is very fast initially. It doesn't take you even the time to create an automated transcript, but the other side of that is that you have to watch the full clip every time to get its meaning. You can't glance at the transcript and understand the summary without rewatching the video. So in the long run, when you're going to be going back over your data, it can take more time. There's less time savings than you might think. And as automated transcription gets faster and better, there's less of a need to work without transcripts. Even a bad automated transcript can be better than nothing in some cases. If you take field notes while you are recording your data, those field notes can be linked into Transana as a transcript. And you go through and you put time codes in. Those field notes are a guide of what happened when. You can link those to the video or audio that you collect, and that makes your field notes more useful, because if you read something in your field note, you can then immediately call up the media data behind that portion of what's recorded in the notes. But linking your field notes to the media data make them much more useful in the analytic process. You can do minimal transcribing, what I refer to as gisting. And gisting is essentially you create rough segments that describe what's going on at any given portion of the transcript. And you can note what the most important thing is about each segment without taking the time to get all of the words down correctly. So it's really, really fast. And again, this is something that is less necessary as automated transcription gets better and faster, but it's still something worth thinking about. So I have some examples here. So we can work with video without a transcript at all. I can select an interesting segment.
There's two places in the books that I want to.
I can play that segment. I can code that segment even without a transcript present. A gisted transcript is an abbreviation. So let's just move that.
I'm going to flip this one up. Maybe. There, I'm going to flip that one up, and I'm going to flip this one down. What is the same? Okay. What did we find out?
They're the same.
An uplift. Yeah. So from now on, if someone's going.
So you can see from that my summaries allow me to locate what I'm looking for. They serve that function of using the transcript as a map that I talked about. And they allow you to do that without taking the time to create the full and precise, accurate verbatim transcript that we're talking about. Partial transcription is another approach that some people take, where they go through their data once and they only transcribe the interesting parts, the analytically relevant parts. When you have data where some parts are really interesting and some parts are not, you can be much more efficient in terms of devoting your energy to coming up with transcripts over that. over of the interesting bits and skipping the less interesting bits. Saves time, but you're at risk of missing things that might be important that you didn't notice the first time through. And again, this is a process that's less necessary as automated transcription gets faster and better. So verbatim transcript, this is what, in theory, automated transcription gives us. However, so you type what you hear, or the automated transcription program types what it hears. But there are different levels of detail that you can go into in a verbatim transcript. If you have somebody who repeats, who repeats the words they say, who stutters or doesn't talk fluidly, do you want to reflect that in your transcript? In some research projects, that's absolutely vitally important as an indication of level of certainty or fluidity of speech or particular speech disorders, or depends on what you're studying. That might be important, might not be important. Maybe you prefer to have the transcript that smooths it all out and turns it into good, proper written English instead of human speech, which is messy and less than ideal in many instances. But that's an analytic decision. Do you mark the pauses? Do you put in the ums and uhs and likes, and all of that? When passages of a transcript are unclear, you can go over them repeatedly when you're transcribing and break out who's saying what in overtime, or turn up the volume really, really loud to catch words that are hard to catch, or whatever. And you can make passages clear in transcription that are hard to hear in listening to the audio. Verbatim transcriptions make the data searchable at the word or phrase level. And again, the accuracy of that automated transcription is important for this, but even an inaccurate verbatim transcript is more searchable than no transcript at all. It's going to allow you to get many, if not all, of the words you're looking for. Verbatim transcripts allow word clouds, allow word counting, so that you can look at the details of the language that your participants use, the words they use to describe what's going on for them. That can be very interesting and fruitful in terms of an analytic approach to certain types of data. And recognize these transcripts take time to create, but automated transcription helps. And again, let's go to an example. So I'm going to pull up a verbatim transcript next to my gisted transcript, just for comparison's sake.
Yeah, so from now on, if someone's going to, if you want me to flip it up or down, what we call that is an up-down flip. We don't call it an up flip. We don't call it a down flip. We call it an up-down flip, because that shows people we're talking to that we know. Doesn't matter if you flip it up or if you flip it down, you get the same result.
So this example is interesting because there's this one spot where the teacher says we call it an up-down flip, and one of the kids chimes in with the correct name too and mirrors what the teacher's saying there. That is really good evidence that the teacher has communicated effectively, and at least some of the students get where she's going. They understand what she's talking about. They're using her terminology. So the automated transcript is probably not going to catch that. The gisted transcript certainly doesn't catch that. The more precise verbatim transcript done by a human catches that, and that detail actually ended up being important in this particular data set, again, because it showed that understanding of what was being taught. It showed that attention being paid to the way the teacher was approaching the information. And those were the kinds of things that the researcher was looking for. And so that was valuable to that. Beware when you're working with verbatim transcripts, whether they're automated or manual, beware of the temptation to stop listening to the data and stop watching the video. Yes, you get an idea of what was said by looking at that transcript. And even I, in my own work, will read summaries of clips and transcripts rather than watching the video all of the time. But there are definitely times when what is said comes across differently than what you read. And so when I'm preparing a manuscript, for example, I play the media for every quote I put into a manuscript, into an article, to make sure that the inflection doesn't change the meaning, to make sure that I understand exactly what the person is saying, exactly what they mean based on how they say it, and that my quotes are accurate, not just in terms of the letters on the page, but in terms of the intent of the participant, because that's really important in doing research. So remember that the media, not the transcript, is your data, and be true to that. Translations. I was working with a project in Luxembourg, and it turns out that when kids start school in Luxembourg, maybe half the class speaks German and a third of the class speaks French, and a couple of kids speak Portuguese, and there's always one kid who speaks Luxembourgish, which I didn't even know was its own language until I got involved in this project. And so the kids can't talk to each other. The first year of school is spent with the kids learning to communicate with each other. And some really, really fascinating linguistic things happen during that year, as the kids take grammar and vocabulary and meld them together to communicate. So they might take a German grammatical structure with a German noun and add on adjectives from French and from Portuguese to say something that couldn't quite be said exactly that same way in any one of the languages. And one of the problems that that research team ran into was that not all of the researchers spoke all of the languages, which, as you can imagine, made analysis more challenging. So they ended up doing multiple transcripts. They did a French transcript and a German transcript, and typically a third, a transcript that was whatever language was spoken, and then a fourth transcript that was in whatever other language they needed for the research team, so that everybody could work on the data.
All right. Okay, now are they the same? When you now, I'm going to flip this one up. Maybe.
And it led to some really interesting discussions, both on the evolution of language, but also about the nature of language in terms of the use of idioms and vocabulary differences. And one language has words that describe things that another language doesn't even have, and what's going on with that. And so they ended up getting a huge amount of auxiliary information out of that whole process by creating these multiple language transcripts to reflect their data. Another comment about automated transcription is, if you do have data where there are multiple languages spoken, where there's code switching going on, or different groups speaking different languages, that is not something that automated transcription handles at all well at this time. I've done a little bit of experimenting. Somebody sent me a sample video that had multiple languages in it. And I had this theory that I could look at where the automated transcription software was confident and know that that was a word in the language. I had it do a transcript from each of the languages separately, and I thought I could use the confidence level to as an indicator when words were spoken in the correct language and when they were spoken in the other language that was different than what the transcript was. And I found that the confidence was not at all related to it being a correct word in a correct language. That in fact, the automated transcript was sometimes highly confident of absolute gibberish that was words spoken in a different language than it was transcribing. And I found that it had low confidence in some of the areas where it had the right language, and I could not use that confidence level as a proxy for figuring out which language was being spoken as a way of creating a melded transcript that handled mixed language situations. Beautiful theory, absolute failure in practice, but it was a fascinating little experiment to go through. So don't trust translation as a part of what I'm saying here when you're dealing with mixed languages. That is something that can be facilitated by multiple transcripts as well. But it allows access to the data to people who don't speak the language being spoken. And it's really interesting for studying languages. How are we doing on time? Okay. So there's a whole host of other kinds of transcripts that I've done a lot of work with. Visual transcripts, descriptive transcripts, gestural transcripts, a whole host of invented notation systems for indicating information about media data that is nonverbal in nature. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that can be done with this. It allows you to bring a visual, behavioral, or other observable layer from your data into your analysis. Making it into a transcript makes it more analyzable more easily in many cases. You get more out of your data, particularly video data, than just what the words convey. And that can be really important. It's also true that different layers of the video can be reflected in that. So I was working with a project at one point. They were looking at student documentaries, and they looked at the director's perspective on the documentary and the sound engineer's perspective on the documentary and the audio engineer's perspective and the cinematographer's perspective. They broke each of those perspectives into a different transcript. Each of those transcripts had a different timeline. They didn't quite break segments up in the same way, and they were able to see an incredible level of sophistication from student filmmakers by looking at these different layers and to look at the different perspectives that went into creating these documentaries. So you can use multiple transcripts to reflect different layers of content, different layers of analysis on the same data. And by having multiple transcripts at the same time, that allows you to look at the interplay between those different levels and to do some very, very cool analytic work around that. So let's look real quickly at gestures. Here's some newscasters going into commercial break. And so you can see that I have the noises that they're making in one transcript. I have the actions that he's making in one transcript. I have the actions that she's making in another transcript. And that allowed me to see when they were moving together, when they were moving separately, and some other things like that. So you can get into gestures and open up a whole additional layer of analysis. You can also do the same thing with different representations of the visual layer. And so I've experimented with a number of different systems. I've used text descriptions, but one of the things that I found really helpful was actually screenshots. To bring screenshots in and create a transcript of screenshots allowed access to visual data at crucial moments. So this is a news piece on the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. It's from the BBC, so a British perspective. But I noticed that in all of their visuals about the housing crisis that was part of that financial crisis, you notice this is US home auction. All of their visuals for the housing crisis came from the US. So there was this subtle underlying thread of the housing crisis being an American-made part of the crisis, not the fault of the Brits, which I thought was a very interesting thing to, they never said that in their report, but that was the clear implication of the images that they used. And so you can create all kinds of transcripts to bring different aspects of your data into the analytic process, as using those transcripts as tools for your analysis. You can create your own system to describe literally anything that is analytically meaningful for your research. But the more transcripts you have, the more detail you have to work with, the more power you have in your analysis, and the more time it's going to take to create all of that. So there's always trade-offs in doing research, but you can do a lot with transcription. Images in transcript can be very powerful for bringing in the visual layer. Screenshots is one tool. So this is literally a screenshot from the movie The Princess Bride, and I think that conveys the emotional state of Inigo Montoya. The first of 6 times he says his classic, "My name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die." And putting the screenshot after each time he says that, you can see the very different meaning and intention of that same repeated line, the different state of Inigo Montoya as he says it each time. And it tells a really important story that you can't grasp just by looking at the text. You can bring in external images. So if you have photographs of student artifacts, you can drop those images into your transcripts and locate them in a particular point in the narrative of the classroom. You can capture things that are hard to put into words. You can emphasize particular visual points. It's really useful for publication. If you want to grab 1 or 2 crucial images that make a point, you can use those images to make points during publication, and having those images and transcripts makes it easier to do that. But recognize your video is right there. It's your primary data, so don't go overboard, because the bottom line is that images are huge and they slow the process down considerably, because it takes a lot longer to load a transcript with 120 images in it than to load a transcript with 6 images. Viewed through particular analytic lenses, I already talked a little bit about that. A transcript can influence the way that you see the data, and you can leverage that to create transcripts that help you see your data from a particular viewpoint. And you can then combine those viewpoints to do a multi-layered analysis. And selections from different transcripts of the same thing may have very different analytic meanings, and Transana has a whole host of tools allowing you to capture exactly the meaning you want and to look at those differences in meaning where that is important. Conversation analysis, discourse analysis, interaction analysis, those are all methods of transcription designed to reveal more about your data. We are out of time, and so I'm just going to go ahead and end things on that note. If that's something that you're particularly interested in, by all means, I'm happy to talk more about that. Okay, so that wraps up what I wanted to talk about. And at this point, I'm happy to answer questions. I know that a number of people joined us halfway through the process and may have missed the part of the presentation that was specifically about automated transcription. So if you have questions about something that you missed as well, I'm throwing the floor open for questions. Thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate your being here, and I hope that this was interesting and helpful. I'm happy to stay and answer questions. If you don't have questions, you're welcome to log off, and thanks very much for coming.